to look and see for yourself. Why ask somebody else when you're experiencing it right now? So it's as simple as that, but yet notice the human condition is one in which we see ourselves always in terms of the conditions, attachment to conditions, attachment to the physical appearance we have, and to the cultural attitudes and religious attitudes, personal identities. Everything becomes more than what it is. And so the practice of meditation, as encouraged by the Buddha, the samatha vipassana ways of meditating, are ways of developing a sense to experience for yourself this completely awakened consciousness in the present moment. When I first started practicing meditation in Thailand many years ago, and of course the emphasis was on the three characteristics of existence, of all conditioned phenomena: anicca, dukkha, anatta. And anicca, I had no problem with. It seemed obvious, spoke for itself. Dukkha, I could see that. Anatta, I couldn't at all. Because if there's one thing I felt is that I'm here, this is me. And why should I deny it, I am a separate person, a personality, an individual, a physical form. And to say that I don't exist sounds ridiculous. And then that's from the very conditioned mind of seeing myself through the ego, the sense of my identity, my self-worth in regards to my experience of life, and my appearance, nationality, social status, religion, educational qualifications, gender of the body, age, all the rest create this sense of, this is what I am, this person, this separate individual person. And so anatta was the kind of the enigma of, for me, because even though I didn't, I wasn't kind of saying it's not true. I didn't quite understand what the point was. And then over the years, training in monastic life with Luang Por Chah, and actually beginning to investigate the self-view, the sense of self as I experienced it in my daily life, I could see, how I began to observe how this awareness was one thing, and the emotional habits, the memories that would arise and cease, the identities, the cultural assumptions, everything would arise and cease according to conditions, and they were always changing, and that one couldn't find anything in these conditions that had any permanent soul or self, or they are what they are, but they are in the state of flux, of change, and that which is aware of change. Then, of course, to be really aware of change, you have to give up thinking about it and be the mindfulness itself, be the observer, the knower. So this is very direct and it's very simple, but human beings are not simple. We're very complicated. And coming from my background from the United States, complicated personality that I imposed on experience of life was the very thing that I could relate to as suffering. Because as I grew older, and when I was a child, life was quite simple, and then because I was discovering life, and I didn't have a lot of complicated views or opinions about anything, just learning, experiencing, investigating things around me. And then, as you grow up, you gain more and more conditioning, and then I remember in my teenage years, as when I really began to notice how much suffering I was experiencing. I think in the teenage years, one's self-consciousness is at its peak. If you notice, most teenagers are very much worried about what others think of them and how they look and what kind of clothes they wear. And of course, you're making your sense of your self-worth and judgment by, how acceptable you are to your peers. And this tends to linger through one's life if one doesn't really investigate experience. I found the life of a Buddhist monk a great opportunity to do this, because this was the whole point of being a bhikkhu, according to Luang Por Chah, was to find out for yourself and to cultivate the path of awareness. The teaching of the Lord Buddha is an expedient means, so in the Western world, where we have, like for example in the UK now, it's a multicultural, multi-religious society. So there's been enormous efforts to understand other religions. And they have this interfaith movement in London and in other parts of the UK that try to bring all the different religions together and at least have some kind of discuss their differences and try to create some kind of harmony and respect for each other's religions. And of course, there's almost every religion now represented in, say, the London interfaith movement. So different forms of Buddhism as well as Hindu and then the different Christian, Jewish, they have Zoroastrian, Baha'i, everything, that Muslim, so that all this is meeting, and of course the difference is wanting to find a common bond or some kind of common belief. They're always struggling to form some kind of prayer that all religions could relate to and all religions could agree to and say. So they found in this interfaith movement in London that all religions can agree on a certain prayer except the Buddhists. So then the accusation is that the Buddhists are not a real religion, or that it's more of a philosophy, or it's a kind of form of humanism, or ways of putting it outside the category of religion. Because to most people, like in the Western world, they regard a religion as believing in God, believing in a deity. And so and of course, Buddhists, we don't have this. This is not the foundation of our practice. So it does put us almost in the opposite. They almost accuse us. Some would even consider us atheists, which is now quite respectable in Britain to be an atheist. So it's not like you're going to be persecuted. But there's always a desire to label and fix you into some kind of category. And Buddha Dhamma doesn't really fit totally into any category. So is it a religion, is the question. And then tracing the word religion back to its Latin roots, religio, it means, literally means in Latin a kind of a conventional means to bind you or to the ultimate reality. So it is, in this sense, Buddhism is a religion, because it definitely does that. And then, I mean, it's not bind you and a kind of tie you, but it's a way of pointing at the ultimate truth, or whether you call that ultimate truth, or in theistic religions, it's always a form of has a paternal aspect to it. So a belief in God is the way Christians tend to regard religion. Now, in the Buddha Dhamma, there's not a denial of God. It's not like, it's criticizing that, but it doesn't approach that subject. It's not the kind of modus operandi. It's not the basis for being a Buddhist. There are gods in the scriptures, deities and devatas. But this isn't the same thing as what the Christian, Muslim, Jewish see as God, you see. So then saying that I definitely see the Buddha Dhamma as a very clear religion in that meaning of its original meaning. It's not a theistic religion. Now, theistic religions tend to start with a creed of some sort, so I believe. And then Buddha Dhamma starts with Buddha's first sermon after enlightenment, and with there is suffering. So this is quite interesting juxtaposition, because when I was brought up as a Christian, we had to learn the creed. When I was a child, I can still recite the Nicene Creed for you if you want. And something you never forget, but so it starts out, I believe in God, and so this was, this was the beginning phase. This is what you start with, and then in Buddha Dhamma, of course, it's in terms of the actual unique teaching of the Lord Buddha. He taught there is suffering, there are the causes, the cessation, and the way of non-suffering, of the path, the Eightfold Path. Now this is very interesting, why the Buddha used something so ordinary, so banal, so common as human suffering, as a noble truth. Because, why don't you talk about love, or universal love, or something inspiring? This suffering bit sounds very depressing. Because it's easy to misinterpret the intention of the Buddha as some kind of just person who's teaching a depressing way of looking at life. But the very statement in the Pali tradition is there is. It's a statement. It's not saying everything is, or there's only suffering. It's a statement that's quite obvious. It's a fact. We can all see that ourselves. It's not a matter of believing in it, it's just recognizing it. So there is suffering, and then of course the way to be free from suffering. Well, sometimes in the interfaith movement they never get to the fourth noble truth. They just stop at the first one, because that's the first thing they encounter. The thing I found in living in Britain during these many years is that there is, the teaching of the Buddha fits into almost every category. It's religion, it's philosophy, it's psychology, it's science. It's everything. It includes everything. And this word Dhamma is that way. It means it's a word that may include, it's all inclusive. So Buddha's teaching can be put in different contexts. So when I find I'm talking to an interfaith group, I talk about Buddha Dhamma as religion. But if you're talking to a group of scientists, then you can put it in that category. or psychologists, but it's just that in its, the Buddha's teaching includes everything and no thing. So it's, it's like a paradox, or it takes you beyond just the conditioning of thought and having to categorize and define and explain and analyze every condition like we tend to do. We want to know, there's this conceit in the human heart that wants to know everything about everything. Like God, to be at the top of the universe and know everything. And so that, we trying to desperately now to learn more, increase our brain power, increase our knowledge, to know more and more about everything that we can possibly know about. But it just goes on and on and on, and both into, vast, universal, endless, infinite universe that we're experiencing, to the minutiae, nanotechnology and microscopic, the other direction of just that which we cannot see but we can experience or see in some way through technology. So this direction of always seeking something outward. Now notice that the human in your own lives, how the tendency is always to seek happiness as something you find outwardly, or seek security, or this movement because of the nature of our human state of looking outward and trying to find. Even in theistic religions, it's easy to interpret them in terms of finding God as some external force out there, and yet in the mystical forms, say of Christianity, it's about seeking God within, and yet the conditioning, the cultural conditioning, and the thinking process tend to encourage this movement outward, to always look for something external, either in the sky or on the planet or in another country or another person. Now, this is, and then the Buddha's teaching in his teaching of Dhamma is more directing the attention inward. Well, this is a direction that, of course, is what we call Buddhist meditation. We're looking inward. We're not seeking something external anymore. So that's the form of the Buddha Rupa that you can all see here in this Dhamma hall. That it's a figure of a human being that's awake. It's not asleep. It's not in a trance. It's fully present, but it's also looking, the Buddha inward, but not shutting out the world. Buddha Rupas usually, some do, shut their eyes, but generally speaking, most Buddha Rupas have their eyes open, and they're present, composed, peaceful, open to all that goes on in their consciousness, whether it's internal or external. Well, this is an example of how to regard a Buddha image, Buddha Rupa, because it is an iconic form, a religious form. The Buddha never established Buddha Rupas. He did not. There were none at his time, and they came hundreds of years later. And so, sometime purists say Buddha never allowed Buddha images, and and they condemn us for not being true to the Buddha's teaching because they see it in a certain way, as Buddha Rupa, as maybe another form of idol worship. But also, I personally, this is a personal take on Buddha images. I really like them, and I think. iconic, religious iconic forms, to me are, they're very helpful in reminding myself. When you look at this image here, this Buddha Rupa, you can look at it aesthetically, say, oh, it's beautiful, or I don't like it, or whatever. You can see it in terms of aesthetic taste, or you can just dismiss it, and like what I was saying before, Buddha never, he never had Buddha Rupas at his time, and that came later. And so we can say we shouldn't have any. That's one way of looking. You can look at them as just part of a tradition. Well, that's the way Buddhists, so we just accept the package. We can form our own opinions and, according to our own tastes or tendencies. But in terms of developing mindfulness and meditation practices, I found them as, rather significant, because when I look at the Buddha Rupa, it always reminds me of Buddha, of Bhutto, of awareness. Then also I found living with these forms, because they are actually peaceful, iconic forms. They're not in a state of passion or excitement, or they're not floating up in the air, living in a different realm. And usually the Buddha's touching the ground, or there's a sense of being grounded on this planet in a human body, but fully present, fully awake. So this is, then this adds a reminder. We do need reminders, because the problem we all face, why we suffer so much, is heedlessness, forgetting the Dhamma. So, forgetting the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. So we get caught up in all the worldly pressures and the desires of modern life, the stress and the pressures and the attitudes and fashions of the time. And they pull us outward. They draw us out into, wanting or not wanting, forming opinions and views. And also at this time there's so much, on this planet, a kind of fear element, an anxiety because of the ignorance that exists in the human heart at this time, with this enormous human population that I don't think this planet has ever had to deal with before. And so the human population is enormous and ignorant of Dhamma. Even though we're educated, we know about things, but not about Dhamma. So this is establishing this Buddhist center here is something to really respect and to consider how to use a place like this for reminding us all through education, through meditation practice, and just encouragement towards looking more honestly and practically at ourselves, not in a critical way. Like Buddhist meditation, vipassana, is not about analyzing your problems and judging yourself, criticizing yourself because you have anger or jealousy or fear. On a personal level, I grew up I was a youth in the 1950s, and modern psychology was the word of the day. And when I was in the Navy, I used to buy all the books I could, modern, recently published bestsellers on modern psychology, fascinated with trying to understand the nature of the mind. But it was, I'm not disparaging this, but it wasn't a liberating experience. I tended to form opinions and increase the sense of myself through this, through trying to figure out why I feel like this, why I act like that, and who's to blame for it. Because in those days there's always somebody to blame. and parents were usually the objects. So we were, we were trying to. My mother didn't. I wasn't really breastfed, so that was why I suffered. But anyway, at this time, in this period of history of humanity, there are opportunities, like in Buddha Dhamma, to begin to find this out yourself without, it's not a blaming, saying my suffering's caused through, not having all the best conditions available to me when I was born. But it's a very maturing sense of learning from the way you are, whatever that might be. We don't need the best conditions for enlightenment. We don't have to have perfect parents and perfect education and in a fair and just and perfect democratic society. We don't have to have perfect health and all the best. Even though that would be very nice, if one does have that. But with all the imperfections of our conditioned experience and our karmic inheritance, we learn from the way we are. This is developing the path of willing to observe the nature of conditioned phenomena, rather than judging it in terms of how it should or shouldn't be, or what its best possibilities could be that I don't have. Because that just tends to create more neurotic complications, and we never find a way of liberation from it. It just increases the complexity of the conditioned realm. With a teacher like Luang Por Chah, he was he was very famous for his kind of directness, and I think that's what most of us who knew him or have followed in that tradition, what we like, because we are from usually most of us are educated and we have acquired a lot of knowledge and know all kinds have very strong views about everything, but we don't know what we're doing till we start looking and observing. When I first went to stay with Luang Por Chah in 1967, I had a real interest in Buddhism, and I had a year of practice as a samanera, of practice of meditation. But the thing that I found challenging, living with a teacher like Luang Por Chah in a very strict Vinaya monastery in Thailand, whose language I couldn't speak, or the cultures was very different from my own. Well, there was so much, it was a tendency to form views and opinions about it. To see in the way my mind would tend to form critical views of how things should or shouldn't be, or even patronizing views, because from a kind of modern American, very kind of avant-garde background on the West Coast of the States, into a very conservative rice-growing culture at that time. All the other monks were sons of farmers, rice farmers. And so it's easy to, on the personal level, to develop views and opinions. One could kind of be like elevate the simple rice farmer as much better off than the complicated, neurotic Sumeto seemed to be. That's one way. Or I could go the other way of, I have much more sophistication and worldly knowledge than they do. And but anyway, the whole effort of Luang Por Chah, his kind of way of teaching, was not trying to convince me of anything or take any position whatsoever, but to observe, to be the knower of what I'm thinking, the opinion, whatever it might be, what I'm attached to, and to observe for myself the power of attachment, what produced, which is the cause of suffering. You know, this is what you do internally. It's not about blaming externally or forming views or critical attitudes about the conditions you're experiencing, but observing. So this puts us in what I call an intuitive state of consciousness, where there's consciousness and with awareness, combined with awareness. And then the Buddha's teaching, like what we used, the Four Noble Truths, was wisdom teachings, meaning we're not just grasping these words and these teachings, but we're actually applying them to the conditions we find within us. Now, the Four Noble Truths is not a teaching about one thing is better than another. It's pointing to the causes of suffering, and then the way of letting go of those causes to recognize, to have direct knowledge and insight into non-suffering. So this is what we call panya, or wisdom. Panya is the Pali word, translated generally into English as wisdom. And so this wisdom is a discerning ability. So it's not about judging, criticizing, comparing, because that's the thinking mind that we have. That's conditioned. But this is not conditioned. It's what you call a universal. It's Dhamma. It's a natural knowing, and you might call it a universal intelligence that operates through discerning the way it is. Now, the way it is, they tell me about the way it is. And because people want me, they think I'm an expert. I've been a monk for so long. And so they would like, people would be quite willing to believe me, I think. Many people would, some wouldn't. But this is not the point. It's a directing attention inward, to find out for yourself. This is not about the kind of meditation master position of, that I tell you what Buddhism is all about. The whole point of Buddha's teaching is find out for yourself. And so this is like the Pariyatti Dhamma, the traditional Pali teachings that have been so well preserved in the Tripitaka. That's what we call Pariyatti Dhamma, or the kind of intellectual presentation of Buddha Dhamma through tradition. And then, so there's Pariyatti and then Bhati-bhati. Bhati-bhati is the practice of Pariyatti. Taking the Pariyatti teachings and putting them into practice, so you have the insight yourself. Because the teachings are not magical formulas that by being able to recite them you have a awakening experience, but you do by putting them to work for you, investigating, using them to discern the difference between suffering and non-suffering, between self and non-self. We have this ability to discern the self, the ego, the sense of me and mine, that I found so difficult when I first ordained. The anatta I found difficult to understand. But as I developed the practice of meditation, vipassana, and insight practices, then I began to see the ego, the sakkaya ditthi, the sense of a self, as a creation, which I could observe as an object in consciousness, rather than operating from the self or the ego as this way I experience life through my personality and my habits and views. So at this time, this teaching seems to be sought after everywhere. We get invited to so many places all over the planet. The internet, the mass media, and all the rest is now making the teachings of the Buddha available, immediately. Push a few buttons and there they appear. And the amount of interest in the practice in Buddhist meditation is growing very rapidly, because there is a sense that we do need to develop wisdom. Just the manipulation of conditioned phenomena as we've been doing in the past is taking us to disaster. We're destroying ourselves through our own cleverness because we don't have the wisdom to know how to relate properly or deal with the conditioned realm that we're experiencing. So on this very auspicious day, my best wishes to this center, this Buddhist society, and has my blessings and all my hopes that in the future it'll be of great benefit to many, many people, and that they making available the teachings of the Lord Buddha, the practices, and also for each one of you to realize Dhamma and be liberated and free from all suffering.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We'd like to seek forgiveness from the greater Sangha, including the community of lay practitioners, again for what we may or may not have done properly, if we have caused any stress or unnecessary suffering to anybody. And so to lead us in this asking of forgiveness from the Sangha, we'd like to invite Brother Baksun, and also we would like to present some flowers as part of our asking for forgiveness from the Sangha. And so I pass the mic to Brother Baksun.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sanghe pamadena, Sanghe pamadena, Dwaratayena, Dwaratayena, Katang, Katang, Sabang, Sabang, Aparadang, Aparadang, Kamatu, Kamatu, Nobante, Nobante, Sanghe pamadena, Sanghe pamadena, Dwaratayena, Dwaratayena, Katang, Katang, Sabang, Sabang, Aparadam, Aparadam, Kamatu, Kamatu, Nobante, Nobante, Sanghe pamadena, Sanghe pamadena, Dwaratayena, Dwaratayena, Katang, Katang, Sabang, Sabang, Aparadam, Aparadam, Kamatu, Kamatu, Nobante, Nobante.
We now invite our representatives to present these flowers to members of the Sangha. And in this gesture, we seek forgiveness from the Sangha for any misdeeds.
Yathavarivaha pura paripurenti sakaram Evameva hitotinam bedanam ubakapate Ititang batitang dumhang kipumeva samichatu Sape purento sangapa Janto banaraso yatha manicho diraso yatha Vachantu saparoko vinatato Madhe bhavat-vandarayo sukhitikhayo bhavat Avivadana silisanijam madhavajayino Janaro dhamma vadhanti Ayuvano sukhang Varang sapphabuddhanubhavena sabbadhamma Bhavena sabbasanghanubhavena